appreciate the complexity of the situation. While Mohamed Morsi was elected president in a democratic election, his government was not inclusive and did not respect the views of all Egyptians. We know that many Egyptians, millions of Egyptians, perhaps even a majority of Egyptians, were calling for a change in course. And while we do not believe that force is the way to resolve political differences, after the military's intervention several weeks ago, there remained a chance for reconciliation and an opportunity to pursue a democratic path. Instead, we've seen a more dangerous path taken through arbitrary arrests, a broad crackdown on Mr. Morsi's associations and supporters, and now, tragically, violence that's taken the lives of hundreds of people and wounded thousands more. The United States strongly condemns the steps that have been taken by Egypt's interim government and security forces. We deplore violence against civilians. We support universal rights essential to human dignity, including the right to peaceful protest. We oppose the pursuit of martial law, which denies those rights to citizens under the principle that security trumps individual freedom, or that might makes right. And today, the United States extends its condolences to the families of those who were killed and those who were wounded. Given the depths of our partnership with Egypt, our national security interests in this pivotal part of the world, and our belief that engagement can support a transition back to a democratically elected civilian government, we've sustained our commitment to Egypt and its people. But while we want to sustain our relationship with Egypt, our traditional cooperation cannot continue as usual when civilians are being killed in the streets and rights are being rolled back. As a result, this morning we notified the Egyptian government that we are canceling our biannual joint military exercise, which was scheduled for next month. Going forward, I've asked my national security team to assess the implications of the actions taken by the interim government and further steps that we may take as necessary with respect to the U.S.-Egyptian relationship. Let me say that the Egyptian people deserve better than what we've seen over the last several days. And to the Egyptian people, let me say the cycle of violence and escalation needs to stop. We call on the Egyptian authorities to respect the universal rights of the people. We call on those who are protesting to do so peacefully and condemn the attacks that we've seen by protesters, including on churches. We believe that the state of emergency should be lifted, that a process of national reconciliation should begin, that all parties need to have a voice in Egypt's future, that the rights of women and religious minorities should be respected, and the commitments must be kept to pursue transparent reforms of the Constitution and democratic elections of a parliament and a president. And pursuing that path will help Egypt meet the democratic aspirations of its people while attracting the investment, tourism, and international support that can help it deliver opportunities to its citizens. Violence, on the other hand, will only feed the cycle of polarization that isolates Egyptians from one another and from the world, and that continues to hamper the opportunity for Egypt to get it back on the path of economic growth. Now, let me make one final point. America cannot determine the future of Egypt. That's a task for the Egyptian people. We don't take sides with any particular party or political figure. I know it's tempting inside of Egypt to blame the United States or the West or some other outside actor for what's gone wrong. We've been blamed by supporters of Morsi. We've been blamed by the other side as if we are supporters of Morsi. That kind of approach will do nothing to help Egyptians achieve the future that they deserve.
Oh, yo, check this out. You see the skull going on? See the face right there? I mean, you can see almost anything in sunlight. Clearly, that's like an omen, don't you think? Here, I'll zoom in so you guys can see. I'm going to use this as the... But look at that. Eerie,
president took moments ago strongly condemning the violence in Egypt, but it is continuing with supporters of the deposed president continuing their protest in places from Cairo to Giza to Alexandria, and more signs of violence while the official death toll stands at over 520. Journalists on the ground are saying it may rise by hundreds more. Let me bring back in our journalists Daphne Linzer and Benjamin Goldberger. And Daphne, let me start with you. You spent so much time in the Middle East. Help us with that perspective, your reaction to what you heard from the president.
I think the president said some very important things. He strongly condemns the violence. He wants it to stop immediately. Those were important, strong messages. At the same time, I don't think the United States can turn its back on Egypt. And I think that he's very clear about that. There's a lot at stake with Egypt. He said right at the beginning of his remarks, it is the cornerstone of peace in the Middle East. And I think he's right. And I think, here you have him saying, a number of things like, we don't want to do these joint military exercises with the Egyptian military, but he knows that they're in charge. And these are people we're going to have to deal with. I think, you heard people talking about maybe sending John Kerry back, the Secretary of State. I think he's going to need a bigger team. I think he's going to need to bring in National Security Advisor, possibly the CIA. The head of the CIA now, John Brennan, worked very, very hard in Obama's first term dealing with Arab Spring issues.
You do wonder, though, who are the people who are going to bring about any change? How long can Sisi last?
I think that's a really good question. How long can he last? And if he's not going to be responsive right now to what the president is saying, I think that will make him weaker and weaker in the eyes of other world leaders. You talked about European foreign ministers having tried to reach out unsuccessfully. If they don't see that Sisi is going to be responsive and understands the ramifications of the kind of death toll we're seeing, I think that is going to hurt him terribly with the U.S. military and with the U.S. as a partner.
Look, the president had almost to say something here, Benjamin. He couldn't ignore the fact that there were more than 500 people dead in the streets of Cairo, but at the same time, there was already pressure building. There was pressure building both from members of Congress, from editorial boards. How much pressure is on the White House right now?
Oh, a ton. And he woke up today and vacationed in Martha's Vineyard and realized that the statement from the Secretary of State was simply not enough, so he had to weigh in. It's clear that he believes that Egypt can still become a functioning democracy, however long that takes. It may be generations, as he said. The question is, what is he willing to do to ensure it?
And I guess that is the question, and where do we go next? If that next step is to send John Kerry, how much bigger will that get? How inclusive will that be? And what are we holding in reserve besides that $1.5 billion?
Right, that's a really good question. What kind of steps can he take next? And I think you can't just come out and kind of hit the Egyptian military very, very hard. You want it to be very calibrated, very measured. David Gregory spoke about strategy. That's important here. It's not all tactic. And I think that's really where he's got to be headed, and that's got to be the focus here.
All right, I want to thank Daphne Linzer, managing editor for MSNBC.com, and Benjamin Goldberger, Times national editor, who have been with us throughout this hour. Again, an important statement by the President of the United States, strongly condemning the violence in Egypt, violence that is continuing. We have seen in cities throughout Egypt today violence, despite the government's declaration of a nighttime curfew and the state of emergency. Men presumed to be supporters of the deposed President Mohamed Morsi storming into buildings, including those housing the government and the provincial government in Giza.